This is my online 7th grade ancient history course, and it focuses on 4 key areas of the world: Mesopotamia, Egypt, Greece, and Rome. So to start off the layout of the course, I have a discussion board straight at the top of the screen, and this is kind of a stopping place for students anytime they have questions throughout the course to open the lines of communication between the students and myself. I'm going to start by showing you the course documents section. In this section, I've included the syllabus and also some review resources for students, but the main thing that I want to show you is the course schedule. So I've set up this course to last for 12 full days. There are 6 total synchronous lessons and 6 total asynchronous lessons, and most of the synchronous sessions are loaded towards the front of the course. So day 1, I would be introducing myself, reviewing the course expectations, and giving students a preview of the final project so that at the end of the course it won't be the first time they hear about it. And then there's the student's assignment for the first day would be to complete an introduction of themselves to their classmates, and that would be due for the next class session, and they would utilize Flipgrid for that. Day 2 would also be a synchronous lesson, and I'd be introducing the students to the ancient civilizations through a map activity and actually going through a synchronous lesson on Mesopotamia. For day 3, they would have an assignment due where they would do a discussion board on Hammurabi's Code and do a reading assignment. And more information on all these assignments in a few minutes. Day 3 would also be a synchronous lesson, reviewing some of the information from the prior lesson and assigning a writing assignment. Day 4 would be the first asynchronous lesson, and they would be completing a self-paced Nearpod on ancient Egypt. So instead of me delivering the instruction, they would be working through it at their own pace, and I'll show you some of those features in a few minutes. For homework, they would complete an Edpuzzle activity and view a model, basically, for the Grapes graphic organizers jigsaw activity that we'll be doing as a culminating activity for each ancient civilization. So day 5 would be back to synchronous to review some of that information, make sure students know what they're supposed to be doing as we wrap up the first 2 ancient civilizations. They would be completing a study guide and doing some review activities, and getting ready for their Mesopotamia and Egypt online assessment, and that would be on day 6. The way I've set up the course is that students have to at least have some proficiency with each ancient civilization before they can move on, and so they'd need to score at least an 80% or higher to move on to the next part of the course. Day 7, I would introduce ancient Greece, and again, this would be self-paced through Nearpod to get the basic instruction, and then their assignment would be to complete a web quest on ancient Greek achievements. Day 8 would also be asynchronous, and they'd be completing a self-paced Nearpod on Rome. Their assignment for that day would be to use Actively Learn to complete an article about Julius Caesar. Day 9, now that the process of doing the Grapes jigsaw discussion has been modeled, they would do that asynchronously to wrap up Greece and Rome. They would be completing the review activities, and then day 10, they would be assessed online on Greece and Rome. Again, they would need to score at least an 80% to move on to the next part of the course. Then on day 11, I would circle the wagons, bring students back together for a synchronous lesson, do some activities to introduce kind of a modern day take on urban planning, since the first part of the course they were looking at ancient civilizations and how they planned their cities and civilizations and made sure that the citizens had enough resources. So to extend their learning and connect it to today, we'd be doing some activities about sustainability, and then I would review the project directions again, and some opportunities that go along with that, and that urban planning and sustainability project would be due on the final day of the course. And again, I would leave the final day of the course as synchronous so that students can share their feedback with the teacher. There can be some celebrations and sharing of projects. So that's the basic overview of the course. In the first folder is where you can find the Introduce Yourself, Flipgrid video, My Identity. They have to introduce themselves to the class, and this is tied to a rubric. Obviously, there's no submissions at this point, but they would go on and complete a video introducing themselves to the class. Now, the way the lessons are set up is that I've used student completion rules, so they cannot move on to activities until they've completed the required steps. So taking a look at lesson 1, Mesopotamia, this would obviously mostly be synchronous, delivered synchronously, but included in this folder, you see the activity, the jigsaw activity that we'd be doing on Hammurabi's code. They'd be translating an assigned law into modern day English, and then they have to comment on each other's laws and answer particular questions. They would also be reading a simplified version, a 7th grade version of the Epic of Gilgamesh and completing a writing assignment. With the writing assignment, there's a rubric included here in Schoology, and that's tied to some of the ELA standards and not just social studies standards. And they would make their submissions through Schoology. For students with special needs, I have an accommodated version of this assignment, and that's for my students who receive a modified curriculum. They would be writing just a few sentences. So going back to the main materials page, lesson 2 would be on Egypt, and then basically lesson 2, 3, and 4, the actual instruction is delivered asynchronously. So students would be completing an Edpuzzle activity, and then a student-paced Nearpod to get their information. So just to take a look at some of the features that I've included in here, should be loading up. So it tells the students how to play the narration, how to take their notes, and to complete the quiz at the end. And this would provide me with a little formative assessment to see how students are understanding the material. So you can see each slide has my own narration on it, which they can play and replay and go back as needed. They can also complete their own notes in this side toolbar here, which most of my students, I've done this in the past, they like to save their notes to Google Drive. It's pretty convenient. Also included in this slideshow are some videos. So I'll show you. There's a video they can watch and questions that go along with it. Some of the questions I've included aren't just writing questions, they might be drawing something instead. And then later on in the presentation, there is some virtual reality. So there's a variety of activities to take them through the information. Finally, this is where I've included my VBI, and I've used this as a way to model the jigsaw discussion that the students will complete on the GRAPES graphic organizer that I've mentioned earlier in the course. So I'm going to take a minute to show you that section of the course. This is where the GRAPES organizers are. Now again, student completion rules are in place, so students have to complete the jigsaw discussion before they can view. So this is what the discussion looks like. Basically, each group that the students would be assigned to would be assigned one of the letters in GRAPES, geography, religion, achievements, and so forth. And they would have to include facts about their ancient civilizations that they've been learning in the discussion, basically collaborating together to come up with as big of a list as they can, and they could use their notes as a resource. So this is basically a review for the students. So taking a look at lesson 3 for Greece, again, this part was asynchronous in terms of delivering the instruction. Similar to the Egypt Nearpod, students would be going through a student-paced Nearpod on ancient Greece, completing a virtual reality activity and a See, Think, Wonder chart. and also a web quest, and they would have to make a submission and complete these activities in order. And then for lesson 4, for Rome, they would do a self-paced Nearpod on ancient Rome, and then they would complete an activity on Actively Learn. So Actively Learn is a resource I'm pretty excited about because it offers a variety of features, especially for students with special needs. So this is kind of what the screen looks like in Actively Learn. It provides some assignment directions and a focus for the students' reading, and for students who need extra help, there's an extra help text summary. The way I would describe Actively Learn is that it's kind of like an Edpuzzle for reading. So interspersed throughout the reading, I've included questions that the students need to answer. There's a lot of images, and it provides you with a lot of data on how the students are understanding the material, and that data can also be aligned to content standards. So you can see how those questions were answered throughout. But the features that I really like, there are different text settings that you can put in for the students. They even have the option to turn on dyslexic settings. And they can also highlight any text in the article. They can add, they can translate, they can, this isn't showing on the teacher screen, but on the student screen, they can have the text read to them, and they can also take notes. And so the way I would assign this is to have students not only answer the questions, but I would want to see that they are actually actively taking notes as they read. So included in the course, I've also added a bunch of review activities. For each test, I've included a Quizlet so that students can practice vocabulary that is introduced to them in the lessons. It should be loading shortly. I'll have to click on it. They can do the flashcards. The other thing I really like that I've included is quizzes. So this is a very engaging way to review material. You can play the game to review some of the key concepts, and it scores them as they go. So you get the idea with quizzes. And then finally, the last part of the course, other than the tests and quizzes, I did include these in Schoology. These are accommodated based on the level of accommodations that students receive, and I can see all of the different versions on my screen, but students would not see the different versions on their screen because you can use grading groups as you assign different assessments. So just show you an example of one of these assessments. Schoology allows you to have quite a variety of different question types. So just as an example, instead of just a simple multiple choice question, I've included some map questions where they have to highlight an area of the screen to identify a location. So there's a lot of different features that they can use. And then the final part of the course is the final project. All the project resources are contained in this folder. There are some jigsaw activities and discussions that I'm going to have the students complete leading up to it. There's a Nearpod and a virtual field trip Edpuzzle that they would complete. And then finally there's the project directions along with the resources they would use to research. So there's a rubric attached to the instructions for the project. And you can also find a Google Doc with all the instructions for the project, a space for students to take notes as they research, and even a place for them to create a team contract for their collaboration and a team evaluation of each other. So overall, the project is designed to connect information to today and encourage ISTE standards like collaboration.